in the works. Congratulations on all that good work.
Oh, thanks. Actually, the most exciting thing we're doing right now is beginning a hydroponic garden.
Cool.
Up in Stanton. We're going to try to do something a little bit different. Inside one of the historic buildings, we are building out the hydroponic facility.
That will be terrific to watch.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's an experiment, something we believe in trying. So, it's not about the money at this point. It's just about doing something that we think will be interesting for the future.
Well, you've got Virginia Center Commons too, right?
I'm a very small piece of that. Regency is a much more significant piece of me.
Right. Yeah, that pool at Regency is getting a lot of buzz.
It's very cool. I was up there, I guess, last Wednesday. I mean, it's coming right along.
Yeah. I don't live that far from Regency, so I've seen a lot of the change, property values going up, all of that. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I think what's going on at Regency is a pretty good example of how change can occur. Not rapidly necessarily, but with a pretty consistently positive direction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Repurposing a structure like that is pretty cool.
I know I've been fascinated watching kind of the demolition of Virginia Center Commons. Being from Hanover, I remember it being built and how it was the cool place to go. And now, so much of it being gone. It's been interesting to watch that evolution over the years.
Yep, it'll be the cool place again.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hey, Janelle.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Keisha.
Coffee.
Good morning.
Morning.
Dan, I'm sorry I will not be with you guys tomorrow, but
You'll be missed.
I'll be available afterwards.
Good morning, everybody. Just to let you know, we are live on YouTube, and we will get started here in just a couple of minutes once we have everybody with us.
Yeah. Good morning, Ms. Holton.
Good morning, Mr. President, and all. Hope everybody's enjoying this beautiful day.
Yeah.
Yes, good morning.
We're still on Zoom.
Yep.
Oh, hopefully we all have a window nearby anyway.
Yes.
Critical.
I'm actually looking at the azaleas now.
All right, I'm going to pull up just the home page so folks that are joining us on YouTube know what meeting this is, and then I'll pull it down, Dan, as soon as we are ready to get started.
That's fine.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Melissa.
Morning.
And
I didn't see. Is Jenna with us yet?
Not quite yet. Don't see
Okay.
her on.
Dr. Bassick is here. Hello, welcome.
Morning.
And Mr. Gecker, I just want to let you know, Jenna was leading a webinar that wraps at 10, so she should be here right at time.
Okay, well, and Dr. Wilford, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Tammy. Yep, it always does seem like an episode of the Waltons every time I do this.
Good morning, John Boy.
Exactly. It's much better than, I guess, the Brady Bunch.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Pam.
Morning, Pam.
Morning.
Emily, I just texted Jenna and
Yeah.
she says she only got tomorrow's panel invite. So if you can
Yep.
just,
It's been sent. It's been sent to her. I accidentally sent it to a DOE email, which is not her exchange. So I have resent it to her. There she is. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this down so we can make sure everybody's here.
I think all the board is here as I count them up. Emily, does that square with what you think? I think all 9 are here.
Yes, we are. Everybody is here. Sorry, I was counting.
It's easier when we're in person and we can just see if there's an empty chair. This actually requires some work and skill, like the Where's Waldo view of the world. All right, I guess, Emily, we're live and ready.
Yes, we are live on YouTube and ready to go.
Perfect. And we're going to call the meeting to order. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is the Wednesday work session of the Board of Education. You know, as many of you know, we have a busy week. We had a meeting yesterday. We have this morning, followed by our retreat also on Zoom this afternoon, and the regular business meeting of the board tomorrow. You know, I think it's well known by now that the Board of Ed is been tasked with responsibility now for, you know, birth to K. This is, I guess, not the beginning of, but, you know, along today's session, we'll deal with early childhood education. We are pleased to have a distinguished panel with us, Dr. Bassick, Dr. Wilford, and of course, the Chief School Readiness Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia, Jenna Conway. So Jenna, I'm going to turn this over to you if that's okay, and we can get started.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. And it's great to see everyone. In preparing today's session, I think as Mr. Gecker noted, we recognize you all are in the midst of a really significant evolution from really thinking about a pre-K to 12 system to a birth to 12 system. You are fortunate to have an extraordinary member who has extensive 0 to 3 and birth to 5 experience, as well as elementary school leaders who have some experience in managing the pre-K and early childhood special education. But I think as I've talked with you all over the course of the last year, we've realized there's an opportunity in bits and pieces in work sessions to bring outside experts in to help just to share more information about what's happening more broadly in the early childhood world. Insights from research. We are fortunate enough to have incredible institutes of higher education and research institutes across our state. And so one of the things that I've talked with Dr. Lane and Emily and others about is really being thoughtful as we take on some of these big topics, like how do we license for the health and safety of childcare? How should we think about quality measurement and improvement, that we bring this information to you and that you can hear. I know you love hearing from me, but that you can hear from experts in the field who can share the most up-to-date research. So with our partners today from the University of Virginia School of Education, really excited to share some information today about research and what's happening both nationally and in the Commonwealth. And this is a precursor to what I'll be bringing to you tomorrow for first review as we think about Virginia's first statewide measurement and improvement system. So our focus today is not going to be on health and safety, it's not going to be on how we fund childcare, not going to be on on those details. Today, we're really going to focus on what's happening in our classrooms. And again, I want you to start off today even thinking broadly, like put classrooms in quotes because I want you to be thinking about the birth to 5 system, as Mr. Gecker noted, and that includes our small family day homes for which incredible women have created classrooms right in their homes that serve a small number of children across age groups. Our child care centers, whether located in a community center, in a church, or in a standalone building, right? Those are kind of infant, toddler, preschool classrooms. Our Head Start programs, whether in schools or in community buildings, have 3- and 4-year-old classrooms, maybe some classrooms that are mixed infant and toddler if they offer early Head Start. And then in our schools, often in elementary schools, sometimes at the elementary school. So you have an early childhood, special education classroom and a VPI classroom that's part of a K-5 or K-3 or K-8. Or you might also have standalone preschool programs where all that you have on that school campus is preschool classroom. So with that in mind, Emily, she'll take us to the next slide. I'll give you a sense of what we're going to cover today. So what we wanted to do today, and we're not going to talk, save for tomorrow, kind of what we do about it, but what we're going to do today is just look at the current research related to thinking about measuring and supporting quality. So again, as a reminder for you, as Mr. Gecker noted, you are now taking responsibility for the oversight of this system. That's what was spelled out in the law last year. The law also said that the board is in charge of establishing a uniform measurement and improvement system, right? So it's more than just sort of unifying. It explicitly says that you're in charge of that. We're going to work with you over the course of the next few years to roll that out thoughtfully and carefully across the state. But what we wanted to do this morning is to orient you on what's happening nationally as it relates to measuring and supporting quality improvement, right? And those things go hand in hand. What is measured is often what people pay attention to, or what they say matters. And as we'll hear today and tomorrow, like the most important part of this is about what you do with those measurements, right? How you support improvement. You'll notice some analogs from your work around accreditation, right? And how you really shifted from just focusing on measuring where kids are at and where there are disparities to really thinking about what do we do to support school quality? What do we do to support continuous improvement? How is that the kind of the key priority, for example, for our accreditation system? So we'll talk a little bit about core elements of quality learning, early learning in birth to 5 settings, talking about kind of interactions and curriculum as 2 really important elements there. Then thinking about what we've learned nationally around measuring and improving quality in early childhood, how we think about improvement at scale, right, going beyond kind of just an individual site or community effort, how we think about educators. And again, I know we've talked a lot about this. We define educators very broadly here. If you are the person in charge of supporting a child's learning and development, we call you an educator. So this is a slightly broader definition than just those individuals that hold Virginia teaching licenses. These are our family day home educators, our child care educators, as well as our school-based educators. And then I think something that we've heard is really important as I've listened in on the accreditation conversations, how do we support growth over time? And again, wanted today to talk about this broadly before I come to you tomorrow and present our kind of first review, our proposal for how to begin this work in Virginia. Next slide, please. So this, just as a kind of reminder of where we are, this shows you what we know about Virginia learners. Virginia is one of the few states, and we're glad to have Dr. Williford and Dr. Whitaker today here and Dr. McGinty, who have helped us get to a place where we have apples to apples information around all of our entering kindergartners, anywhere between 90, 95,000 children, students in Virginia on any given year. And what we see is when we look at the VKRP, which looks at literacy, math, self-regulation, and social skills, we know that our system does not provide every child equitable opportunity to be successful. And we look at things like income, right, as a predictor. Right now, it unfortunately predicts if you were from a lower income household, you are more likely to not have that opportunity to come to school ready. And we know these are the things that are important, not just for purposes of a test, right, but those intangible social skills, that ability to manage your regulations, these are things that help you not only be successful in the kindergarten classroom, but throughout your educational and even your career and college experience. Next slide, please. And before I turn it over to our experts, just want to kind of start to talk about what we think the why is behind this, right? And we've really worked to be very thoughtful about our language. I've learned a lot from working so closely with Dr. Lane and Leah and others, that we don't want to kind of put any of this on the shoulders of kids, right? Particularly some of our kids who are furthest from opportunity. We really think this is about the adult system, right? And that we know that there are two real key challenges that we'll work closely with you over the course of the next few years to address. First of all is that kids need access, right? And we're working kind of to get more resources so that we can serve more kids. We know that early childhood can work. We know that early childhood can work in our public settings, and we have an incredible evidence basis around VPI, VPI plus. We know that early childhood can work in our private settings, and we have kind of demonstrated successes, you know, in VCF mixed delivery and in Head Start, right? We know it can make a difference, but not all kids have access. Right now, we have a bit of a pay-to-play system. You've heard me say this before, right? Infant and toddler care costs more than tuition at most places. I don't remember about George Mason in particular, but I do know for many places, like it is literally more expensive than college, right? And there's no FAFSA, there's no Pell, there's a few programs, but it remains out of reach for many families. And as you'll hear from our national experts today, you know, even if you get a slot, that there's a ton of variability around quality, and that oftentimes that's not because of the everybody comes to this work with the best of intentions, but programs have different access to resources and support. And, you know, when we think about kind of our infant and toddler care, which is most expensive, and yet still our teachers get paid the least and have some of the greatest challenges in terms of being able to achieve quality. And so you'll really hear us try to make sure that we center this work, recognizing the incredible efforts of families to support their children, recognizing the incredible efforts of educators, but knowing that we have to make some systemic changes and investments to really make sure that more kids have access and that more programs have that opportunity to meet these kind of quality expectations. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my UVA colleagues, ask them to introduce themselves, and then we can go from here.
Hi, I'm Amanda Williford. I am the Associate Director for Early Childhood Education at the Center for Advanced Study of Teaching and Learning at the School of Education. And I'll turn it over to Daphne to introduce herself.
Good morning. I am Daphne Basak. I'm an associate professor also at the University of Virginia, and I am the Associate Director of Ed Policy Works, our Education Policy Center at UVA.
And Jessica.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Whitaker, and I'm an associate professor at Castle with Amanda.
And Anita.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anita McGinty. I'm a research associate professor at UVA, associated with Castle. I'm also the director of PALS.
Great. I'm going to talk through a set of slides here on understanding core elements of quality in early learning and birth to 5 settings. And we're kind of going to swap back and forth across my colleagues today. And so Daphne and I will do some presenting, but Jessica and Anita, please jump in as we're walking through the slides as well as needed. So next slide, please. So I think when we're talking about statewide change, it requires a focus on factors that are consistently linked to child development. And we know that high quality early learning experiences set the stage for school success and can narrow early opportunity gaps. We know that that has to be high quality, and that what that means for all children is different. So it has to be sensitive and responsive. It needs to be culturally sensitive to children's needs, but it must be high quality if we wanted to narrow opportunity gaps. And we know that the adults who care for, interact with, and teach young children are the key drivers of high quality and early learning opportunities. So they are the people, these are educators. And when I say teachers, I am also talking very broadly birth to 5 settings, any educator or adult who is interacting with a child, whether it be in a preschool classroom, childcare, or family day home. But they drive those interactions from day to day. We also know that curriculum can provide structure and materials that support those intentional interactions between children and adults. Next slide, please. Adult-child interactions are fundamental to children's early learning and development. And here we'll define interactions as the ongoing back and forth exchanges between a child and significant others, parents, siblings, peers, and teachers in their environment, and they are essential to supporting children's learning and development. So responsive interactions with teachers help infants, toddlers, preschool age children, all the way up really through higher ed. They provide, especially in early childhood, a secure base, a reliable source of comfort and safety, very similar to caregiver interactions and at home, and in which to explore their environments and kind of set the stage for learning. And the scaffolded interactions with teachers help children master increasingly difficult tasks and extend their learning and development. And this is where the high quality part comes in. So that ability of teachers to kind of meet children exactly where they are and know how to kind of help scaffold them to complete the next task that will support their learning. Next slide, please. We find the evidence of the research indicates that high quality adult-child interactions are linked with children's learning and development across all childhood settings. And this is really important because I think the core of these interactions, and even whether you were looking at caregiver-child interactions or teacher-child interactions, again, broadly defined, we have a robust evidence base that shows that children in classrooms where we measure high quality interactions as high and sensitive and responsive and scaffolded do benefit children academically, socially, behaviorally. And we see this across a variety of settings. And I think that is really important if we think about the settings in which these studies have been done and where we see these consistent links between quality adult-child interactions and learning and development. Next slide. And now I'm going to shift over to curriculum. And curriculum, when we think about curriculum in early childhood education, we're thinking about the plans for learning experiences through which children acquire skills, knowledge, abilities, and understanding. A good early childhood curriculum, it helps define and sequence learning goals. It provides structure and routines. If the activities are developmentally appropriate and culturally sensitive, it supports children engagement throughout the day. Some curriculums provide more scripting to help teachers scaffold children's learning. And what I mean by that is like some curriculum actually provides scaffolds to teachers to help explain concepts that then support children's learning. I think a good example of this can be, you can think about this in terms of math, where some of early childhood teachers don't have prior training and skills to understand math concepts. So providing a little bit of scripting can actually help them feel more comfortable and understand how that activity is actually supporting learning. And then a curriculum can also promote consistency across classrooms. I will say a good curriculum can also provide really support just to our early childhood programs where we're facing, this is many early childhood programs where we face issues of turnover, because it helps provide consistency for children. So a teacher might need to move into a new classroom, or a teacher may leave throughout the year. We know this is a major problem in early childhood classrooms, but a curriculum that is used within a program provides a consistency that a child needs so they understand the structure still from day to day and that can remain the same, and they even understand a scope and sequence about what's happening in terms of learning in the classroom. Next slide. Importantly, supporting educators to use curriculum yields greater impact for kids. And this is critically important. I think a curriculum that is not used is not of use. And we know that curriculum use paired with ongoing support for teachers to use that curriculum yields the strongest impacts for school readiness. And we have research from implementation science that shows this again and again across different curriculum. And then we also show, and we also have evidence that even when a curriculum is in place, the variability of the use of that curriculum varies widely. So again, it's the evidence that support for curriculum use or support for an intervention use or a strategy is critically important. And this has to happen at the program and the educator level. They need professional development support to implement curriculum with high fidelity. I will just say I was in Virginia, this was a few years ago, working in a professional development workshop. And I was kind of walking around some tables and I was talking to some teachers, and I don't remember what program they were in, but they were talking about this curriculum that they were not using. It was a PATH social emotional curriculum. Now the PATH social emotional curriculum is one of the most research-based curriculum in social emotional that are out there. There's strong evidence for it to be effective. But these teachers, they knew nothing about this curriculum. A box showed up outside of their classroom door over the summer. And most of those teachers honestly told me, they were like, I didn't even open the box. I have no idea what this curriculum is. And it went into a shelf in my classroom. And so, and that was the right move. The teachers were not supported at all to understand what that curriculum is, why it was of value or what it was. And so you can have the best curriculum materials and they never be used. So I do want to emphasize the importance on the implementation and the research that we show that we can support that implementation and that it will yield greater impacts. Next slide. Okay. Now I am going to turn it over to Daphna to talk about measuring and improving quality in early childhood.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. So I wanted to pivot a little bit from what Amanda was talking to you about, which is kind of what does the science say about how do we support young children and how do we help them learn and how do we do that in classroom settings? And she really emphasized the kind of core importance of teacher-child interactions as well as curriculum as a way to help with those interactions. And what I'm studying and what I want to talk about today is, how do we take what psychologists and the research shows about classrooms and what is a high quality classroom, and how do we start thinking about improving whole systems at scale? So not kind of how can we make one good classroom and describe what works in there, but how do we move a whole system along through policies and systems to create that change? So on the next slide, oftentimes when cities or states are thinking about this kind of quality improvement, they think about it in a lot of different ways. And so the kind of interaction quality and curricula, which Amanda talked about, is among the things that people talk about, but there's a whole long list of other types of measures of quality. So you might think, and this is in lots of ways similar to how we think about K-12, you might think about the teachers' education levels or professional development or the training teachers receive. You might think about classroom environments, like what do the spaces look like, what kind of materials are available, who are the leaders, do we need certain characteristics for the directors of child care centers or the principals of schools? What are we doing on family engagement? How do we and do we assess all the children? Do we know where they are? Are we tracking that? At a basic level, are we thinking about health and safety and ensuring that these places are just safe for children to go? And in childcare, a lot of times we're thinking about the ratios, the group sizes, and as well as kind of these pieces that we know are really important around meeting all the diverse families that come into Virginia schools and giving them the kind of responsive, culturally responsive experience that helps them learn and grow. And all of these things are important. And the reason they are on this list is because when we think about how to make a high quality experience for a child, or if you think about the young children in your own lives who have been in classrooms, you have a sense that there isn't one thing that makes a early childhood experience high quality. There's a kind of a complicated combination of things that matter for making something really effective for children. So that is why there are these long lists. And obviously, if you brought in a lot of early educators and other teachers to talk about what's important, the list could get even longer and broader, and people would be right, because high quality can be complicated to link to one or two specific things. But where the challenges arise is that we have developed a system where there are so many things that sometimes get included as quality that is hard to get traction. And in particular, we have kind of these different sectors in early childhood. And for each one, we kind of operationalize what we mean by high quality a little bit differently. And so sometimes in childcare, we're really focusing on meeting licensing requirements and the long list of kind of things that would make sure that a place is ensuring a safe and healthy environment to leave a child. And then we look at how we think about Head Start, and there are long federal guidelines around what quality, how to operationalize quality there. And again, in a VPI classroom, it would look a little bit different. And so this creates kind of a complexity around all the different ways we might think about quality. And when we kind of come together as a state and think about, okay, but how do we increase quality across all these systems, there is such a complexity across these many things that could be thought about that it creates difficulty to move forward. So on the next slide, I wanted to share that there has been a bunch of research happening over the past about 5-ish years, looking at different states' efforts to think about quality, define quality, think about how it gets measured statewide. And the key sort of finding from that research is we need to simplify that complex, lengthy list of things and try to orient ourselves towards fewer things that are the most relevant. And why is that important? One, it's just incredibly complicated to think about all of the long list of things that I put on that list. To measure them correctly is costly. To have people focus on all of them at the same time is hard. And what the research tells us is that some of those things, you could make quite a bit of progress on them, and you still wouldn't expect to see any changes for young children's learning. So there's this need to focus on the things that we know from the research are the ones that are likely to really have a payoff and to really change the experiences young children have. And that sort of goes back to the ones that Amanda listed of all these kind of states and all the different things they've measured. When people have done studies to say, okay, which of those things actually correspond to how young children are learning in those classrooms, those come down to what are those interactions about and how are we supporting teachers to ensure they can do those kind of engaging, interesting interactions with young children so that kids get a lot out of the program. So one piece is kind of focusing on the things we know matter from the research. The other thing is that we know that teachers are kind of the drivers of what young children learn in these programs. So when we think about how to improve quality, we have to be thinking about things that teachers can actually move, or the teachers have control over, they can understand, they can think about, and then they think, okay, actionably, what can I do in my classroom to move forward on this? So certain things, you can build a quality improvement system focused on ratios or group sizes, but I, as a teacher, don't have a lot of ability to change those things in my own classroom. I have the group of children who are in front of me, but what I can change are the interactions, assuming I get the support, or I can implement different curricula, assuming I get the support and resources to learn how to do that well. So focusing a quality improvement system around things that teachers feel are important and that research show are important as far as measuring, leading to changes in children's development across a variety of domains. So, including their social, emotional well-being, et cetera, is kind of where the kind of advice is going for how states can really move forward. And what I'll talk about on the next slide is an example of a state context where that is the approach they have taken, and sort of my team at UVA has been tracking over time what has happened to quality. So the figure that you're looking at is looking at the quality of teacher-child interactions as measured by the class, a tool that's widely used to capture those teacher-child interactions across every childcare program, Head Start, and pre-K program operating in Louisiana over a 4-year period. And we got really interested in studying what Louisiana was doing for kind of 2 reasons. One was similar to how Virginia's moving now, there was this focus on bringing childcare, Head Start, and pre-K into a single system, thinking about one definition of quality and really trying to push that forward. And this kind of focus on, like I said, the pieces of quality that we think both can be changed, that teachers have control over, and that will matter for kids. And so when you look at this, you can sort of start on the left, which was the first year that they collected this statewide data and collected quality information in every single classroom. And you can see that there were these very large disparities. These light blue ball at the very bottom is the average class score in their publicly funded childcare centers. Head Start is a little bit higher than that in the middle. And then you see that in the pre-K classrooms, which were the ones serving the 4-year-olds, the quality was just substantially higher than in the programs that were serving kind of the majority of the youngest children who are getting access to publicly funded early childhood programs. And so what happened there was a real focus on teacher-child interactions, and not just as a tool to measure, but also as a support around kind of professional development resources, a whole bunch of different targeted investments to try to give teachers coaching and the resources they needed to move on these teacher-child interactions. And what you can see sort of looking across time is that in all the different types of programs in the state, in childcare, Head Start, and pre-K, there was sort of steady improvement over this period. All of them were getting better on these interactions, but the rate of improvement was particularly pronounced for the childcare programs, in part because it was really new to them to be thinking about this definition of quality. So much of how quality was measured before then was around just the licensing requirements, which are important, but in some ways a floor for just ensuring basic safety rather than focusing on the kind of interaction kids need to learn. So this shift towards measuring quality, providing supports around quality led to this sort of sharp increase for them, so that by the last year for which we have data, you can see the system is now one in which the kind of quality a child is likely to receive is much more comparable across the different sectors and across the board higher. So next slide, please. So I think both kind of from reading what other states have done and from my work in that particular state, there are some kind of clear lessons to how we drive system-wide improvement and how we can move towards a higher quality program for all children. One is you need a clear definition of what you mean by quality. And it doesn't need to be one thing, but it needs to be a clear thing that people can wrap their head around and understand. So we want something that obviously makes sense to policymakers and makes sense to researchers who are studying how you measure these teacher-child interactions. But we also want something that makes sense to teachers and to people who are with young children all the time. So something that just has the kind of face validity to say, yeah, okay, I see what you're measuring. I see why that's important. That makes sense with my own experiences in the classroom, and is something that I, as a teacher, feel I can control and have sort of agency over. And then once you kind of create clear definitions of what you mean by quality, there needs to be kind of a commitment to regularly measuring that quality. And that's important to track our progress, to be able to have, you know, a figure like we had to see, okay, has childcare really improved? Are we narrowing those gaps? Like, how are we capturing that data? And also to have very localized data back to programs, back to teachers, to see where are teachers struggling, where do they need additional support. So it's not just measuring for the sake of measuring, but it's measuring for the sake of understanding where we need to provide greater support or give more resources. The third point, you know, I put here is that you know, defining and measuring quality is obviously only one piece of how you drive quality improvement. There is the resources necessary to help teachers get there. So you can't just define and measure, but you also need to support, and that could be professional development, that could be coaching. We spend a lot of time talking about in childcare how it also means reducing turnover and thinking about the compensation of teachers. But pushing those types of reforms without linking them to some clear metric for how we were going to track progress is also a missed opportunity. So it's this combination of a clear definition of actionable quality and a set of supports to make it happen. And then the last point is a focus on equity. And we know that kind of both at a system level, how we think about the pre-K programs versus the childcare programs all over this country has been quite different. So reducing the differences across different kinds of programs, we know that the experiences that 4-year-olds are getting are quite different than what we have for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. So kind of equalizing for different ages of children, and then thinking about the experiences and how they vary by race, by income, and ensuring we're moving towards a more equitable system there as well is critical. So those are kind of the lessons on how we might think about state level system building. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is just sort of where we are already in Virginia in some of this work. So obviously measuring teacher-child interactions is not new in Virginia, and it's something that lots of teachers and centers and programs are familiar with. My team recently did a survey of early educators in Virginia. We surveyed about around 2,500 early educators across childcare centers, pre-K programs, Head Starts, and family childcare homes. A lot of that was about learning how things are going with COVID, what they need supports with, and things like that. But we also asked them questions about quality and how they're thinking about quality. And what I wanted to highlight is that already across all of these sectors, around centers, schools, Head Starts, family childcare homes, there is kind of a high level of existing buy-in for this focus on teacher-child interaction. So those first set of bars are questions that asked teachers how much they agree that ensuring high-quality teacher-child interactions is a priority at their site. And again, this is kind of at the height of COVID. So there are many priorities in their site, but still nearly all teachers, the vast majority, about 90% across all sectors, did feel like those interactions are already the priority in their site. Then we asked teachers how well they themselves understand what the class is measuring and doing as a way to capture quality and measure. And you can see a little bit lower, but still across all the different programs, more than 3/4 of the teachers are reporting high levels of understanding of the class and what it measures. And then the last set of bars there, again, for each of the teachers, we asked them, what about focusing on this when you also have all the demands of COVID and other things going on in your program? Is focusing on the class still useful in this context? And you could see that again, the vast majority, at least 70% across all programs and up to about 85% in some programs, are agreeing that even in this very challenging time where teachers are juggling so much, this focus on interactions is something they are finding useful as they move forward. So kind of thinking through where we are in that process that I outlined, it seems like we already are sort of talking about a measure of quality that not only has Amanda sort of highlighted the science around, but there is already a sense among teachers that they understand it and they find it useful and that they see it as a priority for themselves and their programs. And I will stop there.
Thanks, Daphna. So I'm going to switch over to talking about supporting children's growth over time. And I think, in what kind of we've talked about up to this point, we've consistently said measure things that link to child outcomes. And in Virginia, there is a real opportunity here that we can actually connect those, connect that measurement, the measurement of what are the proximal processes that are happening in classrooms, such as the quality of teacher-child interactions and the use of a curriculum, among other things that are happening in the classroom. And we can actually see how that then links to progress over time and our children growing and our children learning. And we can do that at different levels. But again, if we are using data to support improvement, we have a real opportunity in Virginia that I think is fairly unique. So in the next slide, the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, which right now we are using in all kindergarten classrooms, provides a system to help us understand readiness skills, and it provides tools to support early learning. So, and the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program is a set of coordinated assessments, really importantly, as kind of Daphne mentioned, around kind of measuring quality teacher-child interactions. Measuring children's skills is not new in Virginia. PALS has been measuring children's literacy for many 20 plus years. And what VKRP is relatively new. We started working on this in 2015, but it builds off of PALS and adds assessments of children's early math skills, their self-regulation skills, and their social skills to provide teachers with a more comprehensive pictures of student skills up to this point in the beginning, the fall and spring, or beginning and end of year of kindergarten. And now we have the capacity and opportunity to do that at the beginning and the end of preschool. So we have this opportunity now to actually look at growth from the beginning of preschool through the end of kindergarten on a set of skills that balance children's academic skills and their social emotional skills, which I think is really a nice kind of link to then thinking about that measuring of quality. Importantly, VKRP is also a reporting system. So within that system of assessments, we've built in reports that provide data and information about children's readiness skills back at different levels. So we provide a report back at student levels for teachers, and we also provide a family report for teachers to then use with families to talk about children's readiness skills. And then there are kind of user-friendly reports at the classroom, school, division, and state levels. Again, to really, it's not just the data that we are collecting this data, but like who can use this data and for what purposes. And then VKRP is also a set of instructional resources. Again, if we want information about children's readiness skills to support learning, we have to provide the scaffolds to do that. So even within the system, we provide instructional resources that are linked to the reporting system that help teachers kind of understand these skills and what they could be doing in their classrooms to provide practices that support those skills. So next slide. In this way, the data and the information that we are gathering from the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program can benefit educators, leaders, and families at each level of the system. So again, for teachers, providing, and as part of VKRP, we provide kind of training on like thinking about their data, how to interpret their data, how to use their data to support instruction, to build upon student strengths and support their growth. At the program and the division level, these data aggregated up to that level allow divisions and schools to identify where more resources are needed and what kinds of professional development will be helpful for teachers. When we first started implementing VKRP, a lot of school division leaders really focused their attention, for example, on supporting teachers to promote children's social emotional skills and actually doing some alignment between what was happening in their preschool classrooms and their kindergarten classrooms. And that was because there was more attention brought to actually thinking about children's social emotional skills, because before that, there just wasn't a measure of it. And then at the state level, again, in all these areas, we should be advancing equity because we should be looking at this data to see where children are, and we should be supporting children where they are to meet their needs. And this is kind of just-in-time data at each point in which we can use that data at the immediate level to support individual children and schools and families. And even at the state level, really thinking about where should we be? There are limited resources, and where should we be focusing our resources to provide more resources so that we can increase the availability of high quality early childhood education, for examples, to children who are coming from communities where they are living within low incomes, or children who are coming from communities who are minoritized and marginalized. What are we doing and where are we sending our resources to provide more high quality opportunities? So in summary, I think Virginia is well prepared to support and measure children's growth over time. Here we will have a measure of classroom experiences that focus on what is most linked to child outcomes. So being able to measure the quality of adult-child interactions, being able to measure the use of curriculum, being very inclusive about publicly funded birth to 5 settings, including infants, toddlers, preschoolers, as we talked about, and across all the different settings, VPI, early childhood special ed, Head Start, early Head Start, Title I, center-based care, and family day homes. So just the field and the scope of like who we are working on really does advance equity. And then I think the opportunity here is really being able to link children's experience to their school readiness outcomes, having all of this data through kind of the Link B5 data portal, which Anita McGinty has been leading the development of, and these VKRP assessments and PALS, which is already in use, really just provides an opportunity to kind of examine what we're doing and whether it's working over time and in a pretty unique way. And I think that might be our last slide.
Excellent, thank you. So we wanted to make sure we held some time, and I think, Emily, we have it till just about 11 o'clock. If you have any questions, either about how quality is measured across these settings, how states are tackling when they're facing requirements similar to what we are facing, measurement and improvement, how it all fits together in terms of being able to thoughtfully measure growth over time, particularly among our youngest learners. Again, we've got, she didn't speak, we've got Dr. McGinty, who supports our PALS work. And I know we've come in front of this group before talking about some of the literacy setbacks this year, as well as Dr. Whitaker, who thinks a lot about the math aspects of early childhood. So we've got an all-star panel, and just want to see if there's any questions from the board now.
Yeah. Are there any questions from board members? Mr. Swan?
Yes, good morning. Awesome presentation. So my question is, who will evaluate the teacher-child interactions in order to determine the quality?
Sure. Well, we'll talk a little bit tomorrow about the kind of a potential approach for Virginia. It might be helpful, either Amanda or Daphne, to talk a little bit about class and how class is not only used in Virginia, but across the country as one way, Mr. Swan, of measuring teacher-child interactions.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then other folks can jump in. So I think within kind of at least the field of developmental and early childhood education research, you can measure the quality of adult-child and teacher-child interactions in a multitude of ways, and I have done so using a variety of tools. I think the class tool is unique in that it comes from research, it comes from kind of a base of adult-child interactions and with a basis in kind of attachment. And I think the thing that is probably most unique about it is its capacity to actually get people reliably to look at the quality of teacher-child interactions through the same lens. So the ability to kind of get people through a relatively quick training to actually see interactions in a similar way and actually provide a metric or a quantitative score in which two people could walk into a classroom and score the same way. Across these systems, people tend to measure in who does that measurement and who actually conducts that observation is different across systems. Whether it is someone, for formative purposes, it is good if it is someone who actually knows the teachers well and can kind of interpret that data and provide feedback on like, hey, we saw you do this and this was great. And then there's this other instance, we had this interaction and I'm wondering how we might be able to change that to better support a child. So I think, in that way, kind of someone who is local and kind of known to the program or known to the teacher is a really useful observer. And we also kind of like to keep a check on like whether or not that observation is kind of more versus less objective, less biased versus more, you can have an independent observer come in and look at the classroom and see if they're kind of seeing things the same way. So that varies, and I think that Jenna will talk about that tomorrow. I will just say in terms of kind of thinking, and there are other tools to measure the quality of teacher-child interactions or adult-child interactions, and I think that's important to think about. They are often complicated and difficult for folks to get reliable on. I say that having kind of thrown away a semester's worth of data because I have not been able to get people to see things the same way in a video or a classroom based upon a particular measure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Robertson?
Yes, I'll echo Anthony's comments about how awesome it was. Indeed, we have all-star presenters here who have established a track record across the Commonwealth for so long. And thank you for your presentation today. I just want to make this a shout out to UVA colleagues and to also thank you for your service and support of the UVA K-12 Advisory Council, which is comprised of 108 school superintendents who benefit directly from your service. You were also integral in the production of the Early Literacy Summit last October and the Early Childhood Summit prior to that. Jenna has a keen way of roping in top quality talent each time. I'm sorry I won't be at the meeting tomorrow, but very supportive of the presentations that are being made tomorrow. This is more than anything, it was just a shout out and a thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Robertson. You guys can respond if you want to, but it's not sure that one required a response other than thanks. Anybody else? Dr. Wilson and then Ms. Holton.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for your time and for the presentation. Amanda, as you were responding to Mr. Swan's question about class, I'm curious, and maybe this comes at a different time, perhaps tomorrow, but thinking about those programs which are in family day settings or family home settings in terms of, this idea of who evaluates quality. If you're a singleton, so to speak, that becomes more difficult. And then how do you create systems perhaps among the single sites so I suspect that that's part of the conversation or part of a model that either exists or could exist.
Yeah, and I'll let Jenna talk more about that, or just confirm that you'll talk more about that tomorrow. But I do think the question about class and family day homes is a good one, because most of a lot of our research and a lot of the things that have happened at scales have happened in kind of classroom-based settings. More and more we are moving into the family day home setting. So people have thought about that, and there is a way to kind of be able to do that. But you're exactly right. Sitting like at a singleton in a family day home, you're not necessarily, although many family day homes do create kind of communities, like localities in a geographic area with family day homes, so that there is kind of a built-in community. But you want to make sure, because there is that increased risk for isolation. So who should that observer be? And it is important. It is critically important that you trust who that observer is, in order for that feedback to be useful to you.
Okay, Ms. Holton.
So thank you. Echoing all the compliments, we are really blessed here in Virginia to have national superstars working in this area, and it's fun to watch you all help us make Virginia a national leader. So my questions are around, so I really appreciated the conversation about the widespread acceptance of class. I am thinking I'm understanding from your responses to the last couple of questions that the widespread acceptance of class doesn't necessarily reflect all sectors yet, that it's more that's more well known and therefore well accepted in the classroom setting. But you can comment on that as I lead into my next question, which is you said that PALS and VKRP are widespread. I assume again that that's just in the classroom settings. And is it now all classroom settings? At some point, there was a Northern Virginia jurisdiction or two that were doing something different. Have we gotten beyond that? And then similar to the survey answers you showed us about class acceptance. I know PALS has long been widely well accepted in the classroom teacher context. How about VKRP reception? Is that now as widely used and as widely accepted among the classroom teachers as PALS has always been or long been?
Yeah. Daphne, on the first question, I didn't know if you wanted to talk through, because you had that last slide with that the family day homes and kind of center-based programs that hadn't been had that as long of a history of class were actually kind of most, they were very interested and had really high acceptance rates.
Yeah, so let me just say that, and then you can answer the more VKRP and PALS expansion ones. But where that survey data came from is from our preschool development grant communities in Virginia, which is a growing portion of communities now all over Virginia. And so in those communities, family childcare homes are being included in class, and it is a newer experience for them, sort of historically, as far as how familiar they would be with that compared to a VPI classroom, as far as how often that's happened. And like Amanda said, of those communities, we have heard really positive things from the family childcare homes about it. And, what I showed you were kind of the survey responses to clear items, but there's also the written responses. And I think the family childcare home teachers liked it a lot because of some of the isolation that people raised about this sector, and working alone and working by yourself and wanting to sort of get the feedback and the reaction. So I think that the experience of being observed and having someone use that tool and then give you feedback was very useful. We had them say a lot of when are they coming back? When can I do more of this? So I think particularly in that sector, that's what we heard. And that's really similar to the experiences in Louisiana too, where I think it's the absence of prior kind of coaching and these types of formative feedback, I think makes people really receptive to this kind of experience.
Yeah, and on the VKRP front, I would say that there's good acceptance in kind of kindergarten classrooms across divisions right now, because that is where we are statewide. And I will also say we were just statewide for the first time in 2019. So all of the divisions didn't even have a full year of VKRP before COVID hit and school shut down. So there wasn't even a spring assessment, but we actually do have good connections. And I think that will help as we think about VKRP moving into the preschool space. So similar to the way that we kind of rolled out VKRP in kindergarten, we started the rollout of VKRP in preschool already in a voluntary way. So we have a set of preschool VPI divisions who have already voluntarily kind of elected into VKRP, and they could do that either kind of full scale, also acknowledging that all these programs were already and have already been doing PALS. So in that way, there's a history of kind of doing these assessments that I do think kind of it builds kind of momentum and acceptance and wanting to kind of collect more information. So preschool programs this year could have elected to bring on VKRP with the literacy, math, self-regulation, and social skills. But we also provided an option for programs to just take up the social emotional measures as well. And that was in part a response to COVID. And we had some programs who said, we would really like that. We'd really like that data. So, and I'll let Jenna talk a little bit about the rollout, but we definitely see the rollout of VKRP happening kind of in kind of a stage-wide, a staging process where it is voluntary at first, and then we kind of move in across time. So in the fall, we'll move it into VPI program, 4-year state-funded classroom-based programs. So VPI, early childhood, special education, Title I, those programs. And then provide an opportunity and an offering if other programs that have state funding would also like to pick it up. And we have had private programs pick up the preschool VKRP. So we have done those trainings already. We've learned from them. And we know that that training is different because they sometimes don't have the history of conducting assessments in the same way. So the training looks a little bit different, but we actually have the opportunity. We've seen good uptake across sectors. Jen, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
The only piece I would add, Ms. Holton, is I think we're trying to be thoughtful about, where we know it can be easily constructed as part of the day, right? And we've learned from VKRP with kindergartners that we think it's very possible in our school-based classrooms. We've had some conversation with Head Start programs, for instance, if they were interested, not required, but as just a way of capturing what's happening with some of our most vulnerable little learners, knowing that oftentimes our Head Start serves our families who are in our most marginalized communities. And then I think we will, as Dr. Wilford noted, think about offering it. I want us to be cognizant for all of the points that Dr. Pasak named, like not too much at once, right? And so kind of really sort of saying our first focus is on interactions. I think we're talking about slowly providing accessible, affordable curriculum and support. And for those that are ready, this ability to then tie those things together, what's happening in the classroom, right? How we're supporting educators to be very intentional about learning development, and the extent to which that's really supporting children's growth and learning, and maximizing it, right? Kids are going to learn and grow wherever, but maximizing it is the kind of the three legs of the stool. And I just think, with certain programs, we're going to want to be very, very thoughtful. And so that's why, as Daphne described, but we've all of these resources and have for the last few years going out to the preschool development grant communities. And we've been surveying these educators and leaders, every year, right? So that we can actually hear from them directly. Are we going too fast, too slow? Is this useful, not useful? And they get a gift card for participating. So we get to Daphne, I can't remember, 80% of the teachers respond. So we feel like we have a pretty good barometer on, our pacing as we think about just so much, right? Because there's some programs in our schools, right? I mean, I think as Mr. Swan can attest, these are things that are not unfamiliar to us. Assessment, curriculum, being observed. When you think about our family day homes, these are all really new things for some. And so really kind of be very thoughtful about, we're creating a big tent, but, doesn't mean we have to push everything at once to everybody.
Okay. Ms. Davis-Ball.
Dr. Mann, were you before me? Would you like to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hands are up all over the place. Hard for me to keep track.
My
Tammy?
comment was just a follow-on to, what Jenna noted, and I too, like everyone else, acknowledge the incredible presentation that we had and thank the presenters for coming and sharing so thoughtfully. And I think the point that Jenna made was certainly something that I think is going to be super important for the board to really wrestle with, because of course, even though we talk about publicly funded, that these are programs with public funding, the reality is that the public funding that they have is incredibly disparate, right? People are getting subsidy assistance to provide support, which we know doesn't necessarily cover the full cost of care, right? So as we think about measuring or desiring, having expectations, making certain that the resources that are necessary to really help move people along is going to be essential for us. There's nothing like having a standard set and not having the resources to get there and wanting to be there. And this is such an important opportunity. And so I really appreciate the mindset and the perspective that the department is deploying as it's thinking about bringing along other providers to be a part of making things better for all children. So just wanted to add that to the mix.
Thank you. Pam?
Thank you, President Gecker. And to piggyback off of Dr. Mann, this is a boots on the ground perspective. The class evaluation system is in operation here in the school that I am at right now. And all of the tenets of the class system extend well beyond the pre-K environment to create a positive environment across the school, pre-K through 5. So I'm a big fan of the class evaluation system. And Jenna and the ladies from UVA, thank you very much. I'm a big fan of everything you're doing. But moving forward, and today might not be the time to have this discussion, but Dr. Mann brought up the disparities in funding. I see a huge need for us to maybe have a conversation in the future about facilities and where are we going to put all of these pre-K children that we're inviting into the schools. I would love to have every 3 and 4 year old in my building, and I would love to provide them with these services, but other schools in Southwest Virginia, and I'm sure other locations are physically limited by size and facilities too. So if we could maybe think about that.
Absolutely. I mean, one sort of, it's great to hear an elementary school leader talk about the class. I mean, I've found, there's a lot of hand wringing about, how do we support our principals to understand what should be happening? And she's got her manual right there. To understand what should be happening in those classrooms, right? I mean, it should look very different in classrooms, even if they both happen to be 10 feet by 12 feet square. And one of the most efficient ways to help prepare elementary school principals is to go through what she's gone through and to kind of understand and to bring that lens. You raise a really important piece about access, and again, I won't have easy answers tomorrow, but I think you're going to hear me continue to come back to you thinking about this trade-off between quality and access, as both you and Dr. Mann have noted, and we have to be thinking broadly, again, kind of across this array of settings to be able to serve more kids, recognizing that not all of these settings get the same resources, and thinking about that kind of, where do we put the kids? How do we support those educators? How do we support those leaders? Those are really important questions. So I don't have immediate answers on that, but that is on the to-do list in terms of, as we think about, it will fundamentally, we'll continue to come back to you. It is going to be a combination of increasing access and strengthening quality that are the two core things that will help us as a board, ensure that more kids have the opportunity to come to kindergarten ready.
Dr. Duran.
Thank you again, Jenna. It's always good to hear your presentations and your excitement and what you bring to us, the vision for what we can do moving forward. What I'm always going to take every opportunity to bring up is thinking about how we're going to implement and really support the professional learning that's needed, the time that's needed. It can't be one of those one-time, as we say sometimes, drive-by professional learning. If we're going to really do what I believe you want us to do in your vision, to have that consistency across the Commonwealth, regardless of even, whether it's public or private, right, or even home. So can you just talk a little bit more about what your vision is around the professional learning that's needed, the resources that are needed, the commitment that we'll need to make as VDOE, as a board, to making sure this is all implemented? Because at the end of the day, many of us who work in the field, we understand it's about how you can get it done, and it's about changing mindset and changing the understanding and building the capacity of everyone who wants to do better by their students. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And how do we get that consistency is, I think, a challenge. Or thinking big term, like you always like us to think big term, across the Commonwealth. When you do that, it's very difficult to build capacity without having the resources. Can you just share a little bit about what your thoughts are on that and what you think we need to do more of?
Yeah, and I'll be very brief, and I promise you, Dr. Duran, I'll bring more of this tomorrow when I talk about the practice year for the measurement and improvement system here on the ground in the Commonwealth with about half the state. I think the key reason we wanted to have these national experts speak about how we're structuring the system is I think that is an important first step. Like, if you try to measure 15 things well at scale, like, you will fail, right? And you will sort of not be able to do it. It will be extremely costly and onerous, and it will be very hard for kind of the whole system. And remember, I talked with us about, we think it's ballpark about 6,000 sites and 10,000 publicly funded classrooms, right? Kind of across the state. And so the one of the things that will ultimately enable us to implement successfully is our kind of work to say we know a lot of these things are good, right? And that whole list that Daphne presented to us, but in terms of those that right now with this group matter most, we're going to focus in on interactions and curriculum, right? And then we can look really specifically at what the costs are, what the time required, that's an often kind of a hidden cost, right? And then what it will take to scale. And we are making a lot of these dollars, we are going to flow out to communities to kind of build that capacity locally. As we noted, if a teacher turns over, right, 2 or 3 times a year, like we have to recognize that we have to put in place at the leader level and the instructional coach level and at the community level, a set of individuals who can carry that information forward and are prepared to support, our classrooms if that turnover occurs. So we have been really intentional about it. I'll walk us through some of that tomorrow, but that's partly why you'll sort of see we have a narrower focus on quality, not because we don't think that quality is, includes all of those things, but because in order to be able to successful and to move, to move kids and to help all of our educators, particularly our family day home and our childcare educators, be supported to improve, like we can't bite off more than we think we can support. But that's a little sneak preview for more to come tomorrow, Dr. Duran.
Thank you very much. And again, as always, when you come to talk to us, that's always going to be a question of mine. So I think
no.
What we've all got to be committed to doing is investing the right resources to change our system requires building capacity, investing in people. And obviously having access is important, but the quality then of what children are being able to access is, in my mind, even more important. So, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I don't see anybody. So I'd like to thank the panel participants. It's always good to have world-class people with the board. I can tell you we can use it as we move forward in this process. Having the best advice from the best people is critically important to where we're going. A lot of this dovetails in my mind with what we're going to be doing this afternoon, which is the linkage between evaluation and professional development, how we can improve the delivery of the product. And, I'm glad to have had this preview. Honestly, I would like to have some time, some more time with the panel to talk about that linkage. I think that's what Dr. Duran was getting to, and how we end up implementing. I think what you're doing here has got a lot of, what we're doing here has got a lot of spillover into the K-12 system also. A lot of, the concepts ought to carry forward. And it's not just about measuring, it's about measuring and then using those measurements to improve those areas of the system that need improvement. And in our case, and I think in your case, you're focusing on the delivery system, the teachers or the professionals who are in direct care of our kids. So with that having been said, the board will be adjourned until 1 o'clock when we come back for the retreat. Thanks to everybody who participated this morning.
Thank you again. Great presentations all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.